Hello, folks. Welcome back to the AA Big Book Stories. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and I'm probably going to start changing the names on the videos for a moment, because eventually I'm going to get back to the AA Big Book Stories. There is a book that is totally dedicated to the stories in the back of the books from editions 1 through 3, the ones that has been taken out. So with each chapter they would take away or and add to the stories in the back of the book. Well, there's a whole separate book that's nothing but the stories they have taken out. I can't recall the name of it, but my accountability partner was telling me about it. Anyway, now I'm on to Celebrate Recovery. And these is 8 testimonies. That is going to be one for each principle of the 8 principles that's in Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-based step program. You still work the 12 steps, but it's a Christian-based step program. It's a Christian-based recovery program. Today's video is brought to you by James 414 Vape Sales. That's James 414 Vape Sales. And actually, James is the one that has hooked me up with this book. And where I'm from is a little bitty small town, so you can't go to an AA meeting every single day of the week. They do offer 2, though, which is on Thursdays and Tuesday nights. But I actually go to a Celebrate Recovery meeting earlier in the day on Tuesdays. So, after I got out of rehab and I done the 90 and 90, I went to a lot of Celebrate Recovery. But now I just pretty much go to 1 or 2 Celebrate Recoveries and the step studies. I'm going to start going to the step studies and Celebrate Recoveries, and then my 2 AA meetings, and maybe church if I can get to it. Sounds terrible, but it is what it is. I'm a busy man. Okay, and today we're going to be doing Principle 1, Testimony. This is a guy named Greg, and this is his testimony. And it's the test. There's 8 principles along with the 12 steps. In Celebrate Recoveries, instead of the 12 traditions, there is 8 principles. And this is the testimony that goes along with Principle 1. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready now. My name is Greg, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with drug addiction. For the first 38 years of my life, I did everything possible to run from my fears, insecurities, and worries. I chose to follow the ways of the world and not live the life Christ wanted me to. I'm the guy who drove intoxicated but never got a DUI. I was the guy who used too much drugs and alcohol, excuse me, but never had an overdose. I was the guy who participated in many illegal activities but never got arrested. Having used alcohol and drugs for over 24 years, my luck seemed to be running out and my life was beginning to catch up with me. Fueled by my denial and the attitude that I was untouchable, I continued with the insanity of my addictions. I was the firstborn son of my 2 loving parents. We lived in a picture-perfect new development in Westminster, California. When I was 4 years old, our family was blessed with the birth of my baby brother. He was born with a narrow valve and 2 holes in his heart. At 18 months, he went in for open heart surgery. The surgery was a success, and the doctors assured my parents that he would be fine. As my brother grew older, my mother began to notice that he was not developing at the normal rate. When he was 3, it was confirmed that my brother, excuse me, was severely developmentally disabled. My early years with my brother were amazing. We played and adored each other like brothers do at this time. I did not realize that my brother was different. The older we got, the more and more I noticed our relationship was changing. Instead of being brothers, I was more like a third parent to him. My brother's mental capacity was that of a 5 years old was of that of a 5 year old, and he really would never exceed that. A lot of the time, I felt like I was the only child with nobody to talk to. I spent a lot of time occupying myself with games and activities. I loved and will always love my brother, but the reality of not being able to connect with him emotionally was tough. I felt confused and alone. Life in our household felt quite chaotic. I remember many nights as a kid when I went down to the family room and my parents would be fighting and yelling at each other. I would put pillows over my ears or turn up the TV to block out the chaos. It made me feel alone. One of the ways I would occupy my time as a kid was by playing sports. Whatever season was in, I would play. I was a kid who would play outside until the street lights came on or until my parents would yell for me. As my brother grew older, I watched his behaviors make make it more stressful and difficult for my parents to take care of him. They had to spend an excessive amount of time with him, and I didn't want to bother them with my problems. Honestly, I was afraid to approach them because I thought they were too busy with my brother. This is when I decided to do things on my own. I decided to start living for myself and my brother, and the best and be the best son for both my parents. I wanted to help my parents forget about the troubles of my brother. This put a lot of pressure on me to excel. I dreamed that I would one day become a professional athlete and would allow me to take care of my brother for the rest of his life. Having a mentally disabled brother made me feel so different from other kids. Some of my friends I would hang out with would ask questions about my brother. They would even times when some of them would make fun of him. I was very protective of my brother and would get into fights with whoever said mean or negative things about him. In junior high school, excuse me. In junior high school, I started to act out. I was a star athlete, but was struggling in school. So, in my attempt to keep the pressure off of my parents, I began cheating on tests, forging notes, and lying about everything. At the end of the eighth grade year, I was introduced to alcohol. I liked the way alcohol made me feel or not feel. My fears and insecurities seemed to go away when I was drunk, and I felt more at ease around my friends, and for the first time felt like I fit in. In high school, I was labeled a jock and was expected to do great things. I felt a great deal of pressure and did not like the attention that it brought me. I just wanted to be like everyone else, so I started hanging out with all sorts of kids. I would hang out with the jocks, the surfers, the student government kids, and the partiers. I became a chameleon and wanted to be accepted by everyone. Unfortunately, I did not know who I was or who I wanted to be. I began living a double life. I would try to keep this image of a good kid during the school days and would party hard on the weekends. I was out of control. I was out of control on the weekends. Everybody wanted to party with me, and I never had any limits of how much I drank or when not to drive. I thought I was indestructible and could not be stopped. My senior year, I developed as one of the best basketball players in Southern California and even received a full scholarship to Division I basketball. This brought me one step closer to my childhood dream of becoming a professional athlete. My double life continued as I began to occasionally use marijuana. This drug made me feel uneasy and uncomfortable, but of course, if somebody had it, I would partake just to be cool and fit in. Leaving for college was an exciting time for me. I thought I was going to be a superstar on a basketball team and have the freedom to do whatever I wanted. I would practice 3 or 4 hours a day, maybe go to some of my classes and party at night. After my first semester, my GPA was 1.7 and I was put on academic probation. My basketball career did not start like I had planned. During the fifth game, I hurt my knee and was out for the rest of the season. I fell into a depression as my basketball season was cut short. I remember going into the head coach's office. He explained to me that he did not know whether if I fit in to this program. I was hurt and confused. He told me that I could work off my scholarship in the locker room by cleaning up after the basketball team. I felt like a complete disgrace. It was Christmas break and I was all alone. I decided to end my life. I went into the dorm room and took a bottle of pills and drank a lot of beer. I felt like I had let everybody down in my family and did not want to live anymore. I believed God, who I knew nothing about, was with me that night. It was not my time, and instead of dying, I got really sick and had one horrible hangover. I would attend three more colleges to play basketball, go to school sometimes, and continue to party a lot. Something I am not proud of is that I played college basketball at every level, Division 1, 2, and 3, and junior college. Not a lot of stability in my life. After college, I got a job with in my father's industry. The industry was perfect for me. Everybody worked hard and partied hard after hours. For the next 4 years, I lived in Newport Beach. I was I wanted to fit in with the hip crowds down in the peninsula, so I started to experiment with drugs. I participated in underground raves and the club scene and used ecstasy, acid, and other types of drugs. When I saw one of my roommates going out of control, I told myself I needed to slow down. One night while hanging out at a bar in Hermosa Beach, I met a wonderful woman. She was not like any girl I had ever met. I enjoyed talking to her and knew deep down she was a perfect match for me. She was beautiful, funny, hardworking, mature, and a loving Christian woman. All the qualities that she possessed where I was not, were what I was not. It was hard to believe she did not want me at first. And this is where I began the manipulation and lies to persuade her to like me. I would tell her everything she wanted to hear. Church was very important to her, so I told her that I was a Christian. I even started attending church with her on Sundays. I knew deep down she was the perfect person for my life. Unfortunately for her, she did not know that I was a fake, a liar, and a person she should not be with. It was easy for me to keep the truth from her as her schedule filled with school and work. I would hang out with her for a couple of days during the week and party with my friends on the weekends. After about a year of dating, we got engaged, and 6 months later, we were married. I thought at the age of 30, it was time for me to grow up, settle down, and start a family. I honestly thought that if I got married, I would change. I would like to say our marriage was a fairy tale, but it was far from it. At our beautiful wedding, I would leave her alone to go hang out and party with my friends. Even our wedding night, which was supposed to be this special time, was not to happen. I was too intoxicated. We were trying to live the American dream. We each had great jobs and we bought our first home in Rancho Santa Margarita and had two dogs. On the outside, everybody thought we were the perfect couple. They had no idea that we were struggling and drifting apart. My wife started to have panic attacks and become very depressed. I was confused and frustrated about how to help her. Thoughts were coming into my head that I was going to have to take care of her like I had to take care of my brother. Since I failed with taking care of my brother, I was afraid I would do the same with my wife. During this time, I began to hang out with more and more with a group of my partying friends. I continued to run away from my stress by numbing out on alcohol. I started opening up to these friends about the pressure in my life. The bad thing was, I was spending less time with my wife, and we were drifting further and further apart. On August 21st, 2005, we were blessed with the birth of my daughter. I thought, our daughter, sorry. I thought that her birth would make me feel easier and hopefully straighten me out. When I held this little girl, I wanted to give her everything she deserved. On the outside, we looked like the happy family, but I was not happy, and soon I would find a new way to help me ease the stress in my life. At age 35, while playing poker at a friend's house, I was introduced to cocaine. I remember telling myself, no, nobody my age gets hooked on drugs. That was a lie. For the next 3 years of my life, I would put this demon into my body. The double life was continuing as I chose to add drug addiction to the equation. It took a lot of work and lying to hide this secret. I would work from 6 a.m. I would work from 6 a.m. till noon and meet up with my friends, with my drug buddies, until it was time to go home. To finance this habit, I would cash my expense checks from works I was stealing from my family. One of my biggest regrets is that I would pick up my daughter from preschool while under the influence. I was placing my daughter in harm's way. There were even times when my wife would work late and I would be using drugs in the kitchen while my daughter was in the family room watching TV. At the time, I thought I was only hurting myself. I had no idea I was affecting my wife and child. Unfortunately, it was life was getting very difficult. The economy was changing, and we were heading into a recession. For me to be successful, I would have to work even harder to succeed, but my addiction would not allow me to. Our marriage had gotten so bad that we were on the verge of separation. Our finances were out of control and we lost our home. My wife insisted that we see a marriage counselor, and I agreed to go. I took no ownership of my part in our relationship, and at times I would even go to therapy high. The constant lying was getting heavier and heavier to maintain. I felt like I was on the verge of having a breakdown from living this double life. I tried I tried and had 2 months of sobriety while white knuckling it by myself, cutting ties with my drug friends and trying to get my life back to normal. Who was I kidding? I could not handle my life for 38 years, and now I was going to stop using drugs by myself. The time came when I had an opportunity to use again, and I did. The bad or you could say the good thing, was my wife found drugs and confronted me. I sat with her in her car, and she persistently asked me what was going on. Then something came over me. I knew I could not lie anymore. I broke down to her and told her I was addicted to cocaine. The feeling of getting this off my chest was a huge step for me and for my relationship with my wife. The next step was for me to get help. Sitting down with our marriage counselor, we discussed a plan. Our counselor told me of this place called Celebrate Recovery that is a Christian based recovery program. Deep down, I knew I needed help, but I had no personal relationship with Christ and was not sure if this was the place for me. I was terrified the first time I went to Celebrate Recovery. I was not like these people, denial, and I was petrified somebody would recognize me as one of those sick people. I sat in the back singing a little bit and looking around. That night, a woman who was a drug addict gave her testimony. As I was staring at her, I realized my worst fears. Her son was in the same class as my daughter. I attended several more I attended several more weeks hiding from this lady, making sure she did not see me. I would like to say that I never saw the blonde lady again, but one day my wife asked me to go on our daughter's field trip, and guess who was there? Yep, the blonde lady. Something inside me was pushing me to talk to her. How do I approach somebody and say, "Hey, aren't you that drug addict who gave her testimony?" I did my best not to sound creepy and asked her if she went to church on Friday nights. From there, I about myself and told her about my problems with drugs. We talked for 30 minutes and she told me that I needed to meet her husband. My wife and I decided we needed to go to Celebrate Recovery as a family since she was struggling with her life as well. We started attending Celebrate Recovery together, and from the first night, we knew we found a home. This is when I met my sponsor. The first time I heard him talk, I knew I needed this guy in my life. He had been a huge he has been a huge impact on my life. I finally had that person who I could sit down with, pour out my junk, and not feel judged. Principle 1 says, I realize that I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendencies to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. Matthew 5:3. A few months later, I was driving to lunch when I saw all these cars turning into a church. For some reason, I felt I needed to go to this service. As I walked up alone to this strange church, I was informed that it was Good Friday. I sat in the church with hundreds of people and learned about the death of Jesus Christ. I was floored by this service, and at that moment I accepted Jesus Christ in my life and nailed my sin, drug addiction, to the cross. I remember sitting down by myself crying and realizing it was God who led me to church that day to start my relationship with Christ. Principle 3 says, constantly choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Happy are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. It began with submitting my life to Christ, and as I continued attending Celebrate Recovery, I learned even more tools to help me on my road to recovery. I created a bucket list of goals I wanted and needed to accomplish in my life. I wanted to attend 2 meetings a week. Check. I wanted to get into a step study where the rubber meets the road. Check. I wanted a sponsor and an accountability team. Check. I wanted to become a member of the Saddleback Church and take classes 101 and 401. Check. All 4 with my wife. And finally, I wanted to get baptized. Check. For once in my life, I had goals and I accomplished them. After being 8 months sober, life was getting better. But there was something deep inside that was eating me up. One night at Celebrate Recovery, I felt like God was speaking to me directly. The focus question for the night was, what was the one thing you were holding on to that you were afraid to let go of? I had a secret that I thought I was going to die with. That night I broke down to my small groups. In the past, I had twice been unfaithful to my wife. I knew I needed to sit down with my wife and finally tell her the truth. I knew that she would be hurt, and I feared that she would leave me. I sat, I sat with her that night and told her everything. I was trusting in God and knew in order for our relationship to work, I had to be honest. I remember a long pause, and she looked at me and said, I forgive you. She told me that she had been seeing a real transformation in me, and that's why she was able to forgive me. She truly is an amazing woman, and after everything I've done to her with the lies, drug use, and now cheating, there was no way I was going to turn back. Since I have been attending Celebrate Recovery, my life has changed dramatically for the better. I needed a program that would not only get me sober, but also place me where I was going to become a better husband, father, friend, brother, person. First and foremost, I needed to find Christ. For 38 years, I was not a Christian. Finding Jesus Christ was the way I was going to get sober and stay sober. I struggle with opening up and expressing my thoughts and feelings. Through this program, I have met men who have similar struggles, but who I can freely open up to without feeling ashamed or embarrassment. I have developed meaningful relationships with my sponsors and accountability partners and other godly men who are there for me. Celebrate Recovery gave me and my family a place where people love us for who we really are. I came to Celebrate Recovery as a drug addict, but through the process of attending the meetings, small groups, and step studies, I learned that I struggle with anger, lust, and basically life in general. I'm a grateful addict because my addiction led me down to the path to Christ and set me up to become a healthy person to deal with the demons that I had pushed down for so many years. I now give back to this program that gave me so much. I helped lead the men's chemically addicted group on Thursday nights in San Clemente and am a co-leader on Friday nights at the Landing, 10th and 11th grade students in Lake Forest. I also have the privilege of sponsoring men, and I can see the Lord work miracles in their lives as He did mine. First and foremost, I owe this to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I would also like to thank my beautiful wife for not giving up on me and being there through our ups and downs. I could not have done this without them. I know that I am a work in progress and have only scratched the surface, which is why I keep coming back. I have the passion of being of service for the next person who is struggling with life. I want to give that struggling person a hope that Celebrate Recovery works. When I introduced myself, I told you I was recovering from drug addiction. When I was writing my testimony, I realized that I used alcohol a lot of my life. I now choose to never drink alcohol again because I do not want to go back down to how my life was. The greatest part is that my daughter will never see her father ever put a drink or a drug in his body. My verse is 2 Corinthians 5:17. When someone becomes a Christian, he becomes a new person inside. He is not the same person anymore. A new life has begun. Thank you for letting me share. And this is Greg's testimony on Principle 1. If you would like, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, one celebrate recovery time, one celebrate recovery place, one celebrate recovery channel. Thank you guys.